Hey, I can't really talk about him in this video, but I'm the fullback guy, that's my thing. But Zach Taylor, that son of a bitch, he refuses to use him. Alrighty, welcome everybody to another team preview here on the Miller Football YouTube channel. If you don't know who I am by now, my name is David. I also go by Miller Football. And if it's not apparent from the gentleman below me's hat and shirt, we're going to be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals today. And of course, I can't do that alone. I'm not a Bengals fan. I want to make sure the team's represented by some people who care for this team deeply. So I've got two fans here with me. To my right, we've got Nicholas, also known as Bengals Storm. And then below me, we've got Adam, who goes by Cincy fan in Atlanta, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I always get confused whether it's in or at. I don't know why it would be at. That wouldn't make sense, but for some reason in the back of my head, that's always what it is. But before we jump into this, how are we doing today, guys?
I mean, good, man. I mean, just counting down the days till training camp, have no content, no players to post right now, but it's going good.
Yep, same here. Just been busy at work, but just waiting for football season to come around.
Yeah, and I feel you, Nicholas. It really is a struggle posting in the off season.
Oh yeah.
This is my second off season, I think, since starting to take creating content seriously. And right now, it is always just a hellhole. It is literally the void. I am struggling hard. I've got this on YouTube, and then on TikTok, I am all over the place when it comes to trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to post. But yeah, thankfully we get to sit down here for at least an hour and talk about the Bengals. So you'll get a little bit of football in your life for the time being. So starting things out.
Hey, Editor Miller Football here. I kind of forgot to ask them about the Damar Hamlin situation. There's a few times in this video where I'm going to allude to the fact we'll talk about it later. We never ended up talking about it. We were having a good time, talking a lot of positive ball, and I didn't want to bring up such a sensitive topic. Obviously, if you want to hear people's thoughts on it, we'll talk about it during the Bills video because it'll be much more prevalent there. But, you know, it kind of is what it is. We're just all happy that Damar is healthy and is going to be able to play this year. So please enjoy us talking about the Bengals for the next hour or so.
He ended up first in the AFC North, 6-1 at home, 6-3 on the road, and then 5-0 in the last 5 games of the season. So definitely can't complain there, right? Got to be feeling pretty good coming off a season like that.
Oh, yes.
And obviously the main benefactor for the Cincinnati Bengals, the main X factor, the man behind it all is Joe Burrow, the quarterback. So I got to ask, my first big question for you guys is, where do you rank Burrow among NFL quarterbacks right now? Because I feel like there's a little bit of parity there at the top after Mahomes, obviously. Maybe you disagree with that. Maybe you think Burrow's better than him. But out of the top guys in the league, where do you guys think Burrow ranks right now?
I got him number 2. I mean, there's no argument that Mahomes is the best. Being a Bengals fan, obviously, we got the bias. You know, we're always going to pick Joe Burrow. But, you know, looking at the stats and, you know, awards and everything, it's Mahomes, then Burrow, number 2. I think it's the main consensus I've seen from, you know, a lot of fans of all different teams. And after that, you know, I'd probably have Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, those guys. You know, a lot of those guys can kind of be interchangeable, in my opinion. But I got Mahomes 1, Burrow 2.
For me, it just changes every week. Mainly, back then I'd say, Burrow's top 5 with Allen, Justin, Jalen ahead of him and stuff like that. But I realized recently, I rewatched the Bills here, and I'm Burrow is better than Allen from the way it looks, and then Justin, play wise, stat wise, it looks better, but really it's playoff success that's a huge benefactor to Joe, and that's a huge reason why I put him above Allen and Jalen. It's more I want to see if he can do it for another season, because his first full year starting, he made it to the playoffs and got whooped by Tampa. This year, he had what Joe had, winning. He made it as a first team, had a pretty easy path to the Super Bowl. I mean, the Niners didn't have a QB; they had a running back playing there, and I don't even know who they play in the division round. But so I just think Burrow has a better resume. He has better passing ability, while Jalen has like the rushing, and just I think Burrow's a more complete guy.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me when it comes to looking at these top quarterbacks, I'm not big into looking at wins or playoff success when comparing guys or putting guys over each other. It's just what I'm seeing on the field. I'm a big tape guy. The tape never lies. And like Adam said, it's Mahomes and then it's everybody else. But I do agree that Burrow is the second best quarterback in football. And I think a big reason for that is there's not a real weakness to his game. Everybody else, you can point something out and be like, okay, he needs to improve there. Or, okay, that is something that's going to hold him back. Like Josh Allen, for example, he's incredibly reckless. He makes a lot of risky decisions, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. It's that live and die by the gunslinger mentality type thing. And, maybe that's your thing. Maybe it's not. For me, it's not. You look at Justin Herbert. Obviously, the numbers haven't quite been there, and there's things here and there that he can definitely improve on. But with Burrow, there's things where he's not as good as the other guys, right? Like his arm isn't as strong as Allen's, or he might not be as quick as Herbert or Mahomes or Lamar or Hurts or whatever. But there's no true weakness to his game. There's nothing you're looking at with Burrow and you're going into the week thinking, okay, we can exploit this, we can attack this, and this is how we win. With Burrow, it's just you kind of hope he beats himself. You hope he makes a mistake, he makes a bad throw, you hit him at the right time and the ball comes out at a weird angle, something like that. There's nothing you're super confident in when it comes to attacking Burrow. And I think that's huge. And there's only two quarterbacks in the league that have that, being Mahomes and Burrow. So I think at this point, I know there's still people that are on the Josh Allen train. There's some people that are on the Justin Herbert train. I think it's pretty clear cut that it's Mahomes and Burrow are 1 and 2. And then after that, you can start to have your debates and whatnot. Personally, I think Herbert's 3, then Allen, then you get into like Hurts, Lamar, Rodgers, etc. But yeah, you got a top 2 quarterback in football. You're coming off a big season. The only thing to really talk about with that then is just kind of the numbers, because there weren't any like big disastrous things that happened for the Bengals. Like most teams, you can point to one thing and be like, okay, that was the downfall of their season, or that was a big issue. Like with the Bears, for example, we talked about the Roquan Smith trade, and we talked about Justin Fields kind of being in and out towards the end of the season. He was starting to get hurt and the defense falling off and whatnot. There's nothing like that with the Bengals. It was a great season throughout. So looking at the numbers, I've really been looking into the EPA per play numbers for this series. They were 12th in rushing, 6th in passing, 18th in run defense, 6th in coverage, 8th and then looking at points, they were 8th in points scored with 418, 5th in points allowed with 322, and 6th in point differential with 96 points. Now, do any of those numbers surprise you guys, or would you say that lines up pretty closely to what you saw on the field last year?
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. Defense was, surprisingly good last year, despite, a couple injuries. But yeah, I think, all those averages are just about right. Rushing game was definitely lacking with Joe Mixon just taking a step back, and, the offensive line still having some struggles beginning of the year, and they kind of started to pick it up middle to the end of the year. So, yeah, I don't disagree with any of those numbers there.
I think like the rushing stat is like ranking 12th. I think that's just really inflated from both the Carolina game and the fact that early in the season we used to give Joe the ball like 20, 25 times a game, and it just never worked out. He only got like 5 yards at most, if you're lucky. And then so later in the season, yeah, it looked like he had a better yards per carry because like, he only had 10 carries. He only had 8, and then you gave it more to Pirine in that later stretch. And I think the most surprising thing was run defense, but because like a stat I saw is like the Bengals ranked 24th when they didn't have DJ Reader, but they ranked like top 3, maybe even first in the league when DJ was on the field. So I think it's just when DJ got hurt, it really killed that stat.
Yeah, it was really apparent when Reader went down that their rushing defense really kind of suffered, because next guy up is BJ Hill, and love the dude, he's great, but DJ Reader is one of the best run stoppers in the game, and it really showed when he was hurt.
Yeah, I agree. Like with DJ Reader, obviously, excuse me, and that kind of leads me into talking about their defense, because something interesting I noticed. talking about them being 18th in rush defense EPA per play, this is a team that really relies heavily on DJ Reader in the run game, or against the run game, rather. Because if you look at their defense, they're not stacking the box like ever. They're just kind of like, okay, DJ, couple edge rushers or linebackers, it's your job. Y'all can do this. We're going to make sure all our corners are manned up. We're not going to put any help in the box. You got this. And most of the time it works, but like you guys mentioned, DJ Reader went down for a little bit. And even then, he's only human. Every once in a while, there'll be some lapses there. So it's interesting to me that the Bengals are so willing to just almost put DJ Reader on an island against the run and completely commit to the pass. And that's a good thing. You know, the analytics will show you if you're stopping the pass, if you're able to defend the pass, well, you're going to win more football games because it's a passing league, all that good stuff. So it's good to see that the Bengals have really bought into that, right? And like I said, this is a team that really, what's the word I'm looking for here? Prioritizes man coverage. This is a team that loves man coverage. Looking at the percentage of plays that they were running different types of coverages, they were third in cover 0 with 4% of their plays on defense being cover 0. They were tied for 12th in cover 1 with 22.5. They were 11th in cover 2 with 16.2%. They were 22nd in cover 3 with 30.9%. And then they didn't run as much quarters and then like quarter, half, which a lot of the league is starting to run now. They weren't into that. 18th in quarters with 12.2% of their plays. And then quarter, half was 21st with 5.9%. And then cover 5, they were tied for 17th with just under 1% of their plays on defense. So this is a defense that, like I said, really trusts their corners to go up and just man up. That they are just really confident in their corners and man coverage. They let their linebackers and their defensive line take care of the run game, and it works. And obviously, this is being ran by one of the smartest defensive minds in football. So, do you have any thoughts on how this defense is ran? Anything that maybe I didn't cover that you want to throw in here?
No, I think you hit it well. One thing I do want to add is, you know, how you said they're not stacking the box a lot. You know, that goes to show Lou Anarumo's trust in Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. Both those guys are very good pass coverage linebackers, and they're very smart and very aware, and they get after the ball. Jermaine Pratt causes a bunch of strip balls and fumbles. He had that big one against Travis Kelce. I think it was in the regular season. But those are just two really, really smart linebackers. And I'm glad we re-signed Jermaine Pratt, by the way. But, the corners are fantastic at coverage. Chidobe Awuzie was having a heck of a season until he got hurt in that game on Halloween. But Cam Taylor-Britt really stepped up when he went out. And then Mike Hilton is one of the best slot corners in the league. And then, obviously, the back end, Jesse Bates and Von Bell. Lost both of them this year, so that might hurt a little bit. They were kind of planning on it, but it was one of the better safety tandems in the league. Not a whole lot of other teams that I would probably rank ahead of them. So,
yeah, you mainly said it well with the loose scheme. I think the only thing I have to say with that is just if you're a fan of just getting turnovers and like loving like the Trayvon Diggs and the fumbles, you will hate the Bengals defense. It is bend but don't break for 4 quarters, 60 minutes. If they have a good drive, a lot of the time it's going to be a field goal. So that's what I hate about it. It's just you won't get many picks. You won't get many good field position for Joe and the crew, but there's definitely not going to be a lot of points scored, not a lot of big plays that happen out of it.
Unless you're playing the Ravens and Tyler Huntley tries to reach the ball across the goal line.
Yeah, that was a beautiful play. But Adam actually brought up something that I planned on hitting on, and that's Jermaine Pratt. Primarily because we saw him, especially in like the last 6 or so games of last year, really come into his own and emerge as a big piece in this defense. You know, this is a guy who was drafted as a safety, converted to linebacker, and it was kind of a slow burn watching him progress throughout his career. And then the back half of last year was really when he exploded. And then obviously you guys ended up re-upping him. But a question I have that's not really related to his play, I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts on it. I'm sure we all remember the clip of him. He was yelling at Joseph Osai and giving him a lot of crap over jumping off sides. And obviously the media ate that up, twisted all these narratives of him being a bad teammate, a bad leader, saying he was a locker room cancer, toxic, all this different stuff. Do you guys buy into any of that, or do you know better? You know Jermaine Pratt's an important piece of this defense, maybe even a leader in his own right, because I don't know much about the guy off the field. I'm just really impressed with what he's been doing on it.
Yeah, he's a high energy guy. That game, there was a lot of emotion in that game, especially at the end. And he knew he was on the last year of his deal, and you never really know what's going to happen. The team might offer you a deal, or you might get a better deal somewhere else. I didn't put too much. I didn't really buy into it too much, and I didn't really pay too much attention to it because, I know what kind of culture that they've built there with Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow, and Jermaine Pratt has been one of those guys, to own up when mistakes are made, and to really kind of show what that good culture is. And that was really the only time I've ever seen him say anything along that sort of lines. And I gave it a pass because there's a lot of emotion at the end of that game. So.
Yeah, I mean, with that, it's just like most of the fans at the time just thought, yeah, Pratt's gone. I think Pratt himself thought he was going to move on to a different team because we were just thinking, okay, we have to extend Joe, T, Chase. So we're going to have to let some guys go. And people really thought Pratt was going to be the guy, one of them, with like Jonah and all that, because we just didn't have the money for him. But so he must have really thought that was his last game. And with it, he just probably on high emotion. Osai, like one day later, Osai was in the building just working out with Pratt himself. So, those two don't have they don't have beef with each other. So, things are good. I think it was really blown out proportion.
Yeah, see, I didn't even know about them working out together the next day. So that goes to tell you just the story and the narrative the media wanted to push with that situation. Like I said, I had never heard anything of him off the field, so I doubted that he was some loudmouth or some asshole. Like you guys said, high emotions, high intensity, maybe the last year on the team. He's been there his whole career. I'm sure some words were exchanged, not just between them, but between everybody after a game like that. But just real quick to circle back to the defense to talk about Lou is it Anarumo? I always butcher the poor guy's name. I am terrible with names. I have to say it at least once a video. I am terrible with names. Like when Chris Olave was coming out, I called him Chris Olave for like a month. And then finally I got yelled at about it on TikTok and changed my ways. But anyways, Lou is one of the best defensive coordinators in football, is constantly putting out teach tape for any type of defense. He always has his guys prepared perfectly for every game. And there's never a game where you're looking at his defense and you're like, okay, that was just a straight up bad play. That was just a straight up bad situation. Like he knows when to call what. He's probably the best defensive play caller in the league. He knows exactly when to put his guys in what types of situations, what type of matchups he wants to get, things like that. And I know the Bengals defense is starting to get more credit as time goes on with this team because normally all eyes are on Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow. But I just feel like Lou deserves a lot more credit than what he gets because that man is a mastermind defensively. And as someone who really likes the defensive side of the ball, it is beautiful to watch what he cooks up week in and week out. But bringing up another one of their coaches, like I said, Zach Taylor is someone that I know has been kind of up and down, at least in the media. I don't know about Bengals fans specifically, but it really seemed like he put it all together this year. It really seemed like Zach Taylor went from maybe he's holding the team back a little bit to, okay, this is the guy. He was an absolute strength for this team. He knew what he was doing. So another question for you guys. Is this something that, you've been waiting on? Do you think this was Zach Taylor finally solidifying himself as the guy in Cincy, or were you already convinced and you weren't, running with what the media and a lot of fans were trying to say about him?
Yeah, I mean, like before the Super Bowl year, everyone just said they wanted Zach's head on a pike, man. They did not like him or his schemes really because it just wasn't his team. He didn't have his roster and what he wanted. And then just throw some money at some guys that he wants, and good draft picks later, he started to see what he wanted as a team, and you really got a good vision of it. But yeah, last year I wasn't really like still set in stone on Zach, like long term, because like, was it Joe and Chase or was it the coach? And like early in the season, I even thought, yeah, it was just Joe and Chase. I mean, they didn't look that good, but that winning streak happened, and the playoff, just somehow winning playoff games happened, and just that made me convinced that, yeah, this is our guy for 15, 20 years. He'll be the guy for God knows how long. But yeah, I really think that Zach really solidified himself as the long-term head coach.
I mean, hell, we had Marvin Lewis for how many years? And Zach Taylor's already accomplished, playoff-wise, more than Marvin Lewis. I'll always give Marvin Lewis credit for turning around a very, very bad Bengals team and, at least making them a contender for the playoffs at the very least. So I'll always give Marvin credit for that. But, I give Zach Taylor credit. Sorry. He came into a very bad Bengals team, inherited an awful team with, Andy Dalton as the quarterback and an old, hurt A.J. Green. So he didn't really have, an offensive line or defense or anything. So the way he was able to build a culture, by signing the right free agents and, making the right draft picks, working with with Brian Callahan, the offensive coordinator, and Lou Anarumo, figuring out what kind of guys they want in the locker room. They want winners, and they draft winners from winning organizations. LSU, with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. So I'm not surprised, and I've always kind of kept faith in Zach Taylor, and last year he showed us. I think he's a top 10 coach. There's a lot of really good head coaches still around the NFL, but I think he's a little underrated. Maybe because there's a lot of attention on Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Maybe they don't give Zach Taylor enough credit because Joe Burrow is just that good and it's a very smart quarterback, and Jamar Chase is just a hell of an athlete. But I give Zach Taylor a bunch of credit, and I think he needs to be recognized a little more.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I think last year really put the world on notice of the type of head coach Zach Taylor is, because at the very least, even if you weren't a fan of how he ran things or, what his schemes were like and things like that, he's always been a good culture coach. And that's been the biggest thing, is he's really changed the culture in Cincinnati. It's a place where players want to play. It's a place where players want to stick around and try to build something. And I mean, no offense by this, but before that, Cincinnati wasn't really that team. They were not a poverty franchise by any means, but they were always kind of stuck in the middle. And Zach Taylor has really been, underratedly so, a big part of pulling this team out of that and turning them into consistently one of the scariest teams in the league. Like, I think it's safe to say that every team in football has the Bengals circled on their calendar as the oh shit game of the year, because it's a scary team. There's really no weaknesses to this football team, just like we were talking about with Joe Burrow. The team itself doesn't really have any weaknesses. I guess safety is kind of the closest thing, but I personally like what they did to replace Jesse Bates and Von Bell, and we'll talk about that when we get more to the offseason. But speaking of Zach Taylor, moving over to the offense, something I found really interesting was the type of run game that Cincinnati ran last year. Because you look at Zach Taylor, he comes from a zone-heavy tree. He's always been a zone run guy. And last year it was the complete opposite. His offensive linemen were really primarily used as head-up blockers, just mauling people, moving them off the line of scrimmage. Looking at the numbers here, they were tied for 23rd in outside zone, tied for 26th in inside zone, but they were tied for 3rd in duo, and then only 22nd in power, 22nd in counter, 8th in draw plays, 9th in pin and pull plays. And then this is something I found really interesting. 6% of run plays ran by the Cincinnati Bengals last year were QB kneels. Somehow kneeling the ball is considered a rushing play, I guess, because, it counts towards rushing yards. 6% of run plays ran by the Bengals last year were QB kneels. And that's just like an insane statistic to me. Normally, this kind of stuff doesn't get me too excited, but if you're kneeling the ball that much, that means you got a damn good football team. Point blank, period. No question about it. So when it comes to the run game stuff, were you surprised last year that it was primarily a lot of man up blocking instead of the zone blocking that maybe Zach Taylor is used to and, came from early in his career?
Yeah, I mean, what you said, like, actually early in the season was a lot of zone runs, a lot of single back I form, but the problem with that was we never did play action. We never could do play action because we never had enough time with blocking to successfully pull that off consistently without getting killed. So teams just only defended against the run when in those formations. So that's why we just went with more gun, inside zone runs, more quick stuff, and that's really what helped Joe's season, Mixon. But even then, it wasn't that great. But I don't know what to say. It's just really it was a great adjustment, one that I couldn't even solve. But it's just, don't know what to say. It's just, thank God we decided to do that.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised. You always got to be making adjustments. So zone run doesn't work. Tried some power runs. Do the draw play. Obviously, our passing attack is the strength of the offense. So make them think we're going to pass, and hopefully that'll open up some run plays. But honestly, it wasn't something I paid a whole lot of attention to. But it's nice to see when those big offensive linemen get out in the field and run over defenders, and Samaje Perine with the kind of runner he was. With Joe Mixon not getting as many carries as he has in the past, and kind of being hurt a little bit as well. Samaje did fantastic. That dude's got a mean stiff arm, playing people on the ground. So I love seeing the kind of power runs with him. And, it'd be interesting to see kind of what they do this year, if they kind of stick with that or if they maybe try and go back to some zone running. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think personally, just judging off some of the moves they made this offseason, namely bringing in Orlando Brown Jr., who's not really well equipped to run in a zone scheme just because he's not the fastest or most athletic guy in the world. He's just a big body. I would assume that might correlate to them wanting to stick with the power stuff, but like you said, we'll see. And something interesting Nicholas brought up is the amount of play action the Bengals run, because I actually have the number here. 18.1% of their passing plays were ran out of play action. That was 31st in the NFL. And like Nick said, one of the factors for that were the Bengals' inability to have time to really execute a play action because of how bad the line play was. But another big reason for that, at least in my opinion, was Joe Burrow. And this isn't a slight at him by any means. This is just a testament to the type of quarterback he is. Because Joe Burrow isn't somebody that really needs play action, because play action is kind of like a crutch for a quarterback. Burrow is a lot smarter than a lot of NFL quarterbacks. And most of his work is done pre-snap. Like on a given play, you'll probably have 5 receivers that are eligible, right? Especially with the Bengals because of how much they like to spread everything out. Burrow has that down to like 2 different guys before the ball is snapped. And then he just looks real quick, figures out which one's open, and fires it to him. Burrow was second in average time to throw last year behind only Tom Brady with like 2.52 seconds. I think it took him on average to get the ball out, which is crazy. So when you have a quarterback that likes to get the ball out quick like that and is really prioritizing reading the field before the ball is snapped, play action isn't something that he's really going to need or probably particularly like, because that's a lot more hectic. That's a lot more just hitting your first read. And that's not Burrow's thing. He likes to look at his matchups. He likes to see, okay, you got a small corner on T, so we're going to throw up a 50-50 ball. Or that corner is pressing Jamar a little too closely. He's going to torch him. We're going to get him. Or Jamar's got a free inside release, quick slant, whatever. Right? He likes to read the defense a lot more than everybody else. He just likes to outsmart everybody, it feels like, which is wonderful. I love that in this age of quarterbacks that are really athletic and really reliant on making something out of nothing almost. Burrow still has that pocket passer mentality to a certain extent. He's very Brady-esque in that way. And as somebody who has always been a big fan of Tom Brady, surprisingly, even though I'm not a Patriots or a Bucs fan, I'm one of the few. I love that style of quarterback. And, my quarterback's a mobile quarterback. Love that too. It's super fun. It's just nice to see that we still have somebody that's like that as at their core, right? At their base, that is the type of quarterback Burrow is. And it's almost like Burrow's like a point guard. Like I said, where he likes to spread everything out and run the floor, put the ball in his hands, let him do his thing. And it's just beautiful. I just can't gush about Joe Burrow enough. Even as somebody in the opposite conference, he is one of the best passers in football. He throws a beautiful ball. He's super smart. He makes a lot of incredible plays. He's just such a fun football player to watch. But Burrow's just, I don't know. He's a fun change from what most quarterbacks are doing nowadays. But moving on from that, let's talk about the offseason. And the first question I have for you guys is, what free agent loss hurts the most? And that doesn't necessarily have to relate to their play on the field. It can just be a player that you really liked and you're sad to see go. Or, maybe you do want to talk about their impact on the field, but whoever it is, what free agent loss hurt you the most?
Well, obviously they all hurt. Jesse Bates was, he was one of my favorite Bengals players. He was one of the few holdovers from the Marvin Lewis era. I'm happy he went to the Falcons. Me being in Atlanta, if I go to any Falcons games, I get to see him, and he's in the completely other conference. So we don't even have to worry about him, unless we play him in a game in the regular season or see him in the Super Bowl. So we kind of knew that he was leaving, so we were all kind of prepared for that. So loved him as a player, but wasn't really, the one that hurt me the most. But Von Bell, that one sucked too. But I think the one that I was probably the most upset about was losing Hayden Hurst, because he had a fantastic season last year. Joe Burrow is getting tight ends paid. He got Uzama paid. I was hate to see him go. And then Hayden Hurst comes in. He's been a solid tight end, for the Ravens and then the Panthers, or no, not the Panthers. That's who he's on now, the Falcons. Ravens and the Falcons. And he just had a heck of a year last year. Some angry runs, as Kyle Brandt would say. Mauling people over, and I don't know the numbers on touchdowns and yards and everything. He had, I think, 800, somewhere around the 800s in yards. I might be wrong. I'm probably wrong on that. But just had a heck of a season, and we were really, really weak at the tight end group. Not a whole lot of depth there. Drew Sample is just, a third guy to have. Doesn't really have great hands, not a great blocking tight end, and no, don't really have anybody else after him. So that one was probably the one that sucked the most, in my opinion.
I hate to burst your bubble, but Hurst only had 414 yards last year. I just Googled it.
Yeah, I don't know where the 800 came from. I was thinking of something else. I knew I was way off.
Yeah,
was
414 and 2 touchdowns on 68 receptions. So solid year by tight end standards. The league's kind of depleted of really good tight ends. So he's probably still in like the top 15 conversation. Definitely productive.
Yep.
But Nick, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure I got that in there.
Yeah, obviously Jesse, he was a tough one. For me, it was just like, you want 20 mil. When I see you on the field, you better play like you're worth $20 million. And I feel like he just didn't live up to that. Von Bell, that one was unexpected to me because we just thought there's no way we lose both guys. But for me, I think the biggest loss has to be Pirine because, for safety, you got Nick Scott and Jordan Battle to replace him. Running back, you got Chase Brown, which, yes, it's a nice fifth-round guy, but, that wasn't what Pirine's main job was. Pirine was the pass blocker. He was the guy who did the nit and gritty, the guy who caught the balls and dribbled a guy to the end zone. He made the aggressive plays. He made the hard running plays, I'd say, well, like Chase, he's the guy who like breaks away. Chase isn't the best pass blocker. He's not the best receiving back. So I love Chase Brown, but I just don't think like you can compare him to Samaje Perine.
Yeah, that's a fair analysis. And we'll talk about Chase Brown here in a little bit when we get to the draft. But I do agree. They are two completely different players. Chase Brown's a lot more akin to a guy like Miles Sanders than he is a guy like Samaje Perine. So I get it. You really don't have that power back in your backfield after losing out on him. And obviously you don't have a great pass blocker back there. Some of the other losses, like Adam said, Von Bell going definitely has to hurt. Guy that was kind of doing the nitty gritty on defense, like you said about Perine. They're kind of like two sides of the same coin, right? Perine and Von Bell, the kind of unsung hero on either side of the ball. Did a lot of like cleaning up a lot of the dirty work, kind of cleaning up messes, came in as an enforcer from time to time. Eli Apple, which I don't know how Bengals feel about him at this point. He's a solid player. It always hurts to lose depth in your secondary, but you replaced him with a damn good corner. So, again, we'll talk about him in a little bit. And then some of the other names, I don't know if any of these are going to stick out to you. Mitchell Wilcox, Clark Harris, Trey Flowers, Brandon Allen, Brandon Wilson, Chris Lamond, Clay Johnston, and Elijah Holyfield. Those are the other names that I was able to pull together that the Bengals lost. I don't think you're going to miss any of them too much, if we're being totally honest. Obviously, you hate to see guys go, but yeah, like I said, I think you can do a pretty solid job replacing them. If you have any objections to that, by all means, speak up, but I can't imagine there's much to say.
I think the only name I'd probably pick out of there would be Trey Flowers. He did a pretty good job, guarding Kelsey. I remember playing the Chiefs. He did a fairly good job guarding Travis Kelce. So he was a good depth guy. So, yeah, out of all those names, that's probably the one that I would pick out that, kind of sucked over all those other guys. Clark Harris is a long snapper for the Bengals. So he was the mustache guy. He's got the handlebar mustache.
Yeah.
So.
Is he the one that got hurt?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. That's tough.
That's one of the reasons we lost that game against the Steelers.
Yeah.
He was close to coming back in that game where through 4 interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
And then both the kickers kept missing kicks.
Mm-hmm.
So
he tore both his biceps, right? Wasn't that the injury?
It might be. I can't remember.
It was something absurd. But it was almost like he put too much force behind a ball and his body gave out. It was something in his arms. He tore something in both arms. I can't remember.
It was a bicep. I remember it was like he just ran full speed and he just got smoked by a Steeler and he just tore his bicep.
Oh, so it was only the one bicep. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That makes a lot more sense than snapping the ball too hard. I guess I forget sometimes long snappers are going to take a hit. So that's unfortunate.
He's what, in his 30s, I think?
Yeah. But to be fair, long snappers play until they're like 60. Like, they are in the league forever. That's how you can tell we're getting deep into this team. We just had like a 2-minute conversation about long snappers.
Football players too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, hey, I can't really talk about him in this video, but I'm the fullback guy, that's my thing. But Zach Taylor, that son of a bitch, he refuses to use him. But moving over to some of the free agents you guys retained, obviously we already talked about Jermaine Pratt, which was huge. Joe Baichy, who is a really solid special teamer, sticking around. Travion Williams, who is someone I find interesting because I feel like there's potential there, and he keeps sticking around in Cincinnati, so I feel like the coaching staff feels the same way. He just hasn't quite gotten an opportunity. So maybe with Perine gone, he'll finally get that. Maybe he can emerge and, him and Chase Brown can kind of fight for RB2 for now. Or if Joe Mixon goes down, knock on wood, not going to wish injury on anybody. You can figure something else out there. And then some of these other guys, Drew Sample, Jalen Davis, Max Sharping, safety Michael Thomas. Is there anyone there that I mentioned that you guys want to talk about, or are we cool to move on to the guys you brought in?
Michael Thomas, he's a great special teamer. Great, with instilling that good culture in the locker room.
Okay.
Great locker room guy. Yeah, not a guy that's going to make big plays, but on defense at least, but really good special team guy, one of the leaders of special teams, and he's been around for quite a while. And our special teams coordinator has been around for I don't know how many years since
he's been in the league 25 years. I just read something about him. He's the assistant head coach now, I believe, as well as the special team coordinator. He's been with the Bengals for 25 years.
Yeah, Simmons, right?
Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah.
But obviously, free agents we brought in here, we've got Orlando Brown Jr., who was the big name. Kind of weird situation where he was a highly coveted tackle, but everyone wanted him to play right tackle, and he absolutely refused because his dad played left tackle. He thinks he's a left tackle. So rather than getting I think it was $24 million a year he was asking for, he ended up getting 16 because he wanted to play left tackle, and that was as much as the Bengals were willing to pay him, which, good for them. Definitely a good offensive lineman. I think he's better as a right tackle than a left tackle, but he's still good. You're getting a quality starter, and he definitely fits what y'all are trying to do in the run game for sure. And then you've got Irv Smith Jr., who's one of those guys that, much like Travion Williams, hasn't really gotten a shot yet, but he's a super athletic tight end, so maybe there's something there. Nick Scott, who's not quite a Von Bell replacement, but he can step in. He's fine. He's a serviceable ball player. And then Sidney Jones, former Chicago Bear Trevor Siemian, Cody Ford, and Terrell Basham. So out of these names, who was your favorite free agent that the Bengals brought in?
I got to say, it's probably Orlando Brown Jr. Not because he's, like the best left tackle in the game or even the best tackle in the game, just because of, it's a huge upgrade over Jonah Williams, because he had a pretty rough year last year for a guy who 2 years ago was probably the best lineman on the team, and then last year was probably the worst lineman on the team. It's not a slight to Jonah Williams. He's not a bad tackle by all means. It was just he was the one that struggled the most, once that offensive line got it together. I read the story or heard the story about Orlando Brown Jr. He was talking about his dad and, why he wants to play left tackle to, honor his dad. And I read that and I loved it, and I have a lot of respect for that. It's props to Duke Tobin for that contract as well. The way he's been able to structure some of these contracts has been, ridiculous. It's crazy. He's not a GM. He's essentially the Bengals GM, but not by title, because I don't think Mike Brown will ever have a GM because of Paul Brown, obviously. But yeah, it's a couple of reasons. He was, probably one of my favorite free agent signings, just because of the upgrade, the culture. He's going to fit right into the culture there. He's already doing good things in Cincinnati too. I've seen some articles about stuff he's doing in the community. So just great guy to have around in the locker room. And it's Chiefs fans that have been trolling a bunch of Bengals fans all over TikTok, Twitter, everywhere, saying we're acting like he's the greatest left tackle in the game, and just they're trashing him, talking about that play where Mahomes got hurt, and it's. Football players are going to have their bad days. I've seen a lot of more good tape from Orlando Brown than I have bad tape. The Bengals have a good offensive line coach, Pollock, I think. I think they'll whip him into shape. I think he'll fit good in the team and the culture. Just an upgrade, and great guy to have around. Great guy to have around in the locker room.
Yeah, for me, I love Orlando. I like getting like Sydney and Scott and all those depth pieces and whatnot, but my guy has to definitely be Irv Smith Jr. That just from Zach Taylor's offense, ever since he started coaching, he's just been very tight end friendly. Anyone that steps into that role is guaranteed to get some catches and gets free. Drew Sample got like 400 receiving yards as a tight end one back then. Uzama got paid after 1 year starting Hayden Hurst. And when Hayden went down, we had Mitch Wilcox starting. That guy caught a touchdown. No one knew who Mitch Wilcox was before that. So but Irv Smith, he has the most potential. He's the most athletic guy we've had in a good minute. He's a decent blocker, I'd say. He's someone that really fits in if the Bengals wanted a tight end. I think they are really banking on what Irv can do, and I think that's the reason why they didn't go tight end in the draft. But yeah, I just think that Irv he's going to have a breakout year. I don't know what his stats are exactly because obviously injuries are a big factor in his play. But yeah, I do think Irv is going to be the biggest X factor in this Bengals offense.
I think he only had like 100, 200 yards or something last year. But, it's another tight end for Joe Burrow to get paid. So I think he will have a breakout year too. I like that pick.
Yeah, for sure. Also, just real quick as a side note, I was slightly off on when I said Darren Simmons was with the Bengals for 25 years. He's been in the NFL for 25 years. He just spent 3 seasons elsewhere. He's been with the Bengals since 2003. So he's spent a few years outside of Cincinnati. But either way, dude's been coaching for 25 years. Yeah. And Irv Smith Jr. is a really interesting player to look at right now because, like Nicholas said, this is an incredibly tight end friendly offense. It feels like every year you've got a new tight end that hasn't really done much with their career. All of a sudden they're playing with Burrow, they look great, then they go get paid, and obviously you guys have covered that pretty well. And Irv Smith is absolutely the most athletic out of those tight ends and has the most upside, so it'll be fun to see what happens there. But yeah, that's kind of it for free agency. Moving into the draft, I don't think it's controversial to say that the Bengals did really well. Now, I have an opinion about a specific player in this class that I don't know if you guys are familiar with how I feel about a certain somebody, and we'll talk about him in a moment. But I want to ask before we start getting negative, who was your favorite pick from the Bengals this year?
Well, if you're going with day one, he's going to kill someone. He's going to really help the team. It's probably going to be Miles or Jordan Battle because what you said earlier with the loose defensive scheme, really trusting the linemen. Back then when Trey and Sam went out, we had a rookie Joseph Osai and Cam Sample and just not the best depth pieces, but now Osai is set for a breakout season. Murphy he got drafted way later than he should have, but so just having him and Osai together after you have Trey and Hubbard out, then those two will wreak havoc together. And then Jordan Battle, I think he's going to beat Nick Scott for the safety. He's really a Von Bell replacement. He's a comparison for him, just hard-hitting, always makes a play, good, can do a little bit of everything. But if I had to go with a name people don't know much about, it'd either have to be Andre Yosivas, wide receiver out of Princeton. That guy is an athletic freak, played track. Dude, it's insane watching his highlights. Or my personal favorite, Brad Robbins, the punter. I think he is, seeing him in practice, getting 5-second hang time, it is beautiful watching Brad Robbins.
Yeah, I hate that Brad Robbins is a Michigan guy, but punters are football players too. So let's go. I love that pick. My favorite pick from the draft was probably another Michigan guy, DJ Turner, fastest 40 at the combine, and the Bengals showed they want to be fast in the secondary. They have some of the fastest players in their secondary. That might have been my favorite pick. I was a little surprised by the first pick with Miles Murphy. Myself, I was convinced they were going tight end when it was 2 picks before him, Dallas and someone else. They passed on the tight end that wasn't Dalton Kincaid. I can't remember his name at the moment, but
Mayer.
Yeah, Michael Mayer. Yeah, I was convinced they were picking him. So when they said Miles Murphy, I was in shock for a second, and then I kind of thought it through. I'm like, okay, he shouldn't have even been there at pick 28, and he was probably really, really high on their board. So love that pick. And then DJ Turner showed they're going to get fast. And then Jordan Battle Alabama's basically an NFL defense with Nick Saban there. So I think Jordan Battle is going to fit in real well. And like Nick said, he can probably beat out Nick Scott for that second starting safety position. I think that's very possible. But my favorite pick, I'm definitely going to have to go with DJ Turner.
All right, so first of all, my favorite pick that y'all made has to be Chase Brown. He was one of my favorite backs in the class, which is surprising for me because typically my favorite traits in a running back are power and vision, and Chase Brown is unfortunately kind of lacking in both of those aspects, but he was just such a fun player to watch. I think he accounted for like 40% of Illinois' total offense last year, which is crazy. He's just a super fun and explosive player. And I've kind of joked in the past after this selection happened that I think he can overtake Joe Mixon kind of quickly in Cincy. And that might be pushing it a little bit because Joe Mixon is a really good running back despite kind of the ups and downs he's had. But I don't know where Mixon's at in terms of contract. I don't know when that's up. But it wouldn't surprise me if by the time that happens, Chase Brown is ready to take his spot and be the lead back in Cincinnati. Because even though he's not a great pass blocker, like Nick said earlier, he is a good pass catcher. And he's a really smart runner despite kind of lacking the vision. If you're just going to run power anyway, then it doesn't really matter. It's not a huge deal. So I like him a lot. And with both of you being high on Myles Murphy, I do have to be the guy who rains on your parade. I got to say, I don't like him. I was not a fan of Myles Murphy. I know there was a lot of hype around him, like you guys both mentioned. He was supposed to get drafted way higher than he did, according to every mock draft out there. Watching him in 2022 looked like watching the big kid on the playground that played gentle because he was scared to hurt all the little kids. I've heard so many different things that could have added up to it. I've heard injury. I've heard defense change. I've heard things going on off the field that kind of had him in a different place mentally. And if that's the case and he goes back to 2021 Myles Murphy, then it's a totally different story. That dude was a demon. And him on Cincinnati's defensive line would be insane. He's an athletic freak. Back then, he was super strong. He was very willing to attack. It's just I tend to put more weight into the most recent season that a player was healthy. And he played every game last year. It's not like he was missing games with an injury. So if he was injured, again, different story. But basing off last year, I just didn't see it. I had a second round grade on him because of the athletic upside, but I just didn't see him as a great player. There's a world where it works out. I'm not totally against it. And I think Cincinnati was the perfect spot for him to land for that to happen, just because we've talked about, the culture there was great. The coaching staff is great. Lou can do wonders with him, even if he doesn't want to be, the big hulking lineman he can be. You can use him on stunts. You can figure different things out to make him work because of how athletic he is. So I'm personally not a Myles Murphy guy, but I see the vision with him. Jordan Battle, like you guys said, was an awesome pick. Just one of the smarter kind of get shit done safeties in the class. He's not flashy. He's not going to force a bunch of turnovers, but like we've said, that's not the Bengals thing. They just want guys who are going to do their job and play physical, play good man coverage, and that's what Jordan Battle is. Another big issue I had with him was I was worried for him to go into a cover 4 heavy system because he's not that guy. He struggles with flipping his hips and things like that. Again, that's not Cincinnati. So again, this is a perfect spot for him. Charlie Jones is a really good pick. He's the ideal eventual Tyler Boyd replacement. He's getting up there in age. You're not going to be able to pay him, T, and Jamar. So when he eventually has to go, Charlie Jones can step right in there. He's a great route runner, super smart, really good, out of his breaks and things like that. I thought he was a great pick. And then Andre Yoshevus, like Nick said, was another great pick. And then DJ Ivey
was last year, so that's
yeah. And I didn't realize it was his last year. That's perfect.
Yeah, and then Joe Mixon, I think he's got 1 or 2 more years left, and then that Myles Murphy pick, they're probably planning on Trey Hendrickson because he signed, I think, a 4-year contract, and he's halfway through that. So yeah,
and like I said, the Bengals did great. They are great at planning for the future and planting the seeds to develop things long term. That's something that I actually meant to mention earlier when we were talking about their coaching staff, is this team has the benefit of like no turnover. You know, there's rarely new coaches coming in, having to teach new things to this team. It's just having a base established and building on it every year. Sure, you got to teach the new guys stuff, but that's a lot easier than having to teach everybody a new system. So they have that benefit. This is like what the Patriots did for 20 years, and look how good they were for 20 years. And then as soon as something shifted, that team fell apart, and they're where they're at now. So if the Bengals can keep sustaining this, which is possible depending on what the coordinators want to do. I don't know if Lou's going to be getting any head coaching offers or anything like that. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, but maybe he doesn't want them. I don't know. Either way, they're in a great spot to just keep doing what they're doing. But the last couple of picks, like I said, DJ Ivey in the 7th round was just good process. He's a really athletic corner, good in man coverage. You're just taking a flyer there. Brad Robbins was a great pick. And then somehow mentally I skipped over DJ Turner. I know Adam already kind of gave you the rundown on him. He's just a great, fast, sticky man corner. And again, that's what Cincinnati wants in a corner. That's exactly what they're looking for. He'll be a great Eli Apple replacement. Probably going to have his rookie struggles and whatnot, but long term, he's going to be awesome. So I think the Bengals did great. Like I said, I don't love Myles Murphy for now, but there's a world where he turns into a superstar, and all the shit I talked on him all offseason makes me look like a complete tool. But there's also a world where I'm right. That's the beauty of draft prospects. But yeah, I really like what they did during the draft. And to kind of close this out here, before we start talking about predictions for next year, I want to run through the roster, talk about anybody that maybe didn't get any spotlight. So obviously we talked about the quarterback and Joe Burrow. I gushed over him for way longer than I probably should have. The running back room, definitely looking good right now. If Joe Mixon can stay healthy, it's a great room to have. Wide receiver room, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, probably the best receiver duo in football. Sure, there's other competition, but I mean, T. Higgins would be a wide receiver one on most football teams, and Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase. Tight end room, we've already talked about. Offensive line, I don't know if you guys want to talk about anyone there. I'm curious to see what happens at right tackle with Jonah Williams and Lyle Collins, what the plan is there. I don't know if you guys have heard anything about that.
I do think Jonah Williams I think he is going to give right tackle a try. I think the reason he was kind of so upset and requested a trade is because he wasn't really informed, that they were signing Orlando Brown, that he was going to be promised to play left tackle. But then again, I think that was kind of, wasn't kind of in the plans. Once the Von Bell deal fell through and Hayden Hurst deal fell through, I think they kind of got the money from that they were going to allocate to those deals. They used that to get Orlando Brown, and he wanted to be a left tackle. So they're like, yeah, it was our weakest spot on the line. So I think it was all just kind of like last minute, and that's kind of why Jonah Williams wasn't. He was requested the trade, and obviously you can tell he's probably a little upset. I think it was kind of coming around to it maybe, and he said he was going to be there for training camp and mini camp and everything. So I would love to see him at right tackle. I want to see him get on the open field and just run some guys over. And Collins, I mean, I love the signing, but he didn't really live up to his potential. Got hurt, obviously, at the end of the year and tore his ACL, so don't even know when he's going to be back. They did sign Cody Ford, some good depth on the right side of the line. I think he could play guard or tackle. So they're kind of playing. They got some pretty good depth on the offensive line with Max Sharping. I heard you mention him earlier as well. I love that they brought him back when he had to step in the playoffs when 3 of our 5 offensive linemen went down. Max Sharping played pretty well for not having played all year long. So I was glad they brought him back as some depth, but definitely going to be a question mark at the right tackle spot. I hope Jonah Williams is there, and I hope he can do well. But I'm not too sure what's going to happen with Lyle Collins. He might be gone after this year or maybe in the middle of the year.
Yeah, I mean, with Collins, I just thought, I remember early in training camp last year, he suffered a back issue, and it just lingered onto him for the entire season. And, the times where we had a bye week or, after a Thursday night game, that's when Collins was at his best because he had a break. PFF scores pass block and whatnot. That was his best game against Baltimore after we played Miami Thursday night, and then after our bye week, he had his best game of the season. So I think Collins, I've heard he's been way ahead on his rehab, so he might be available week 1. But the right tackle battle. I think honestly, I think neither Collins or Jonah wins. I think there's a wild card in there, Jackson Carman, the guy who, when Jonah was knocked down in the playoff game, that number 79 no one knew about, just randomly changed from guard to tackle, and he was actually pretty good at it. He was honestly our second best lineman during that stretch with all the injuries and whatnot. So he's competing at right tackle. Back then, the coaches were mad at him because he was showing up to training camp overweight, out of shape, just not looking like he's focused on football. People have said he's looked slim, he's looked athletic, he's looked exactly like what they thought they were going to get after using a high second-round draft pick. So I really do think they're going to give Carman a chance, and I think he'll really fulfill it as he's been. Because one thing no one's talking about is Jonah's been out because he's injured and not reporting. Collins is still recovering, so who's getting all these right tackle reps? He's getting developed right now. It's Jackson Carman. So I think in the end, Carman's going to pull out and be our week 1 starting right tackle.
Yeah, I had honestly forgotten Jackson Carman was there. I'm not going to lie to you. He kind of went into the back of my mind. I'm looking at the depth chart here. He's listed at 3rd at right tackle. So you got 3 guys that can battle for the position. So either way, you're going to get the best out of those 3, and whoever that should be should definitely be an incredibly solid right tackle. But that'll be an interesting storyline to follow with this team going into the regular season. And then jumping over to defense, we've already kind of said our piece about their defensive line and how good it is. Trey Hendrickson has been one of the more underrated defensive ends in football for a while now. DJ Reader, probably the best run-stopping defensive tackle in the league, if not at least top 3 or 5. Sam Hubbard's also very solid. BJ Hill's really solid. Miles Murphy's there. Joseph Osai, someone I really like. I had him picked as a breakout candidate last year. Didn't quite come to form, but there's always this year. Could definitely happen. I don't know. Cam Sample's there too. So it's a really good defensive line. And the linebacker core, Jermaine Pratt, we've already sung our praises about. Keem Davis-Gaither, very, very solid as well. Logan Wilson, one of the better linebackers in football right now, which granted isn't that hard because there's not a lot of great linebackers, but he's up there for sure. And then Joe Bachi, we talked about as a good special teamer. And then the secondary, Adam kind of covered our bases with the corners early on, bringing up Chidobe Awuzie and Cam Taylor-Britt, Mike Hilton, and then DJ Turner. All really good man coverage corners, pretty fast, pretty, can get physical. And then at safety, you've got Dax Hill, who I was a big fan of last year. Really glad that he's finally going to get an opportunity to start. And right now they've got Nick Scott listed as the starter, but I know me and Nick, I don't remember if you said anything, Adam, about who you think is going to be the guy at safety. Maybe you did, and I just completely skipped over it. And if you did, I apologize. But I think we're all in agreement that it's Jordan Battle.
Yeah, I did say Jordan Battle could likely win out that spot. I wouldn't be mad either way if Nick Scott or Jordan Battle, but I'd like to see what Jordan Battle has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. I think it'll end up being Jordan Battle. I really like what he brings to the table. Like I said, just a super smart, no nonsense, get shit done type of safety. You put him next to Dax Hill, who, people were mocking in the early first round last year. Guys ended up getting him in the late first. Didn't really get a whole lot out of him last year, but he's good. He's really, really talented, really, really athletic, can do a bunch of different things for you. So it'll be exciting to see what happens there. And then, of course, got to talk about the special teamers. Evan McPherson, Money McPherson, one of the best kickers in football. Right now it's Drew Chrisman listed as a starter, but they drafted Brad Robbins. He's got his shot. And then Trent Taylor and Charlie Jones are your returners at the moment. And then Cal Adamitis. I don't know how to say that name. I'm not going to lie to you. But he's the long snapper.
Adamitis.
Okay. Either way, Cal, the man, the myth, the legend, playing long snapper for the Bengals this upcoming season. So with all of that, I've got 2 more questions for you. So we're just going to put this as like a 3-parter. Considering the AFC North is such a competitive division, what team are you the most afraid of? Like, what team do you think poses the biggest threat to the Bengals? And then from that, what's your record prediction for next year? And what player are you most excited to watch, not including Joe Burrow, because that's a cop-out answer?
I mean, yeah, the AFC North question, it's just Baltimore, I'd say, yeah, I'd be afraid of them, but it's just the players and experience we've seen before. It's just they're not, I don't know if it's the trainers or what, they're just not healthy. By the time it's like week 10 through 18, you just like looking at the injury report, it's like, wow, there's a lot of guys playing hurt or out, so gives other teams advantages. Like they always start out like 7-3, 8-3, some like a really good record, and then they just fall flat on their face and either get themselves out of the playoffs or get a low wild card spot, and it happened again last season. As for record predictions, I think we got a pretty easy schedule. We play the NFC West, so like besides San Fran and Seattle, there's like, and we can definitely win those games. The Rams and Arizona's easy. AFC, we play the South. Don't get me started with that. That's 3 free wins and a good game against Jacksonville. Then Cleveland, they've had our number, but I think when the one time we played Deshaun, we smoked them. So I think we're going to be easy with them. Pittsburgh, it's always difficult. It's always terrible to face them, but I think it'll go like 1-1. Baltimore, same thing. I think it'll go 1-1, but and player I'm most looking forward to is Irv Smith, because I really do think he's going to break out. I don't know how much to say, like Pro Bowl caliber season, probably not, because you got Mark and Kelsey in that conference, but I think he'll be the best tight end we've had since Tyler Eifert.
All right. Tyler Eifert's one of those names that you sometimes forget, but then remember, I'm like, oh man, he was such a good tight end. It was just all those injuries. Yeah. So, what was the first question again?
What team in the AFC North are you like the most afraid of, or just poses the biggest threat to you?
In the words of the famous Chad Ochocinco, man, they all suck, man. You know, probably the Steelers. You know, I want to say the Ravens, but yeah, Nick made a good point. You know, they do kind of suffer with some injuries, and the Steelers have not had a losing season in a very, very long time. Kenny Pickett started out a little rough, but did make some, positive steps and some improvement. They did get a new offensive coordinator, I believe. I can't remember who.
Pittsburgh or Baltimore?
Pittsburgh did.
No, they kept Canada, surprisingly.
Oh,
he did just enough to keep his job.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Baltimore got Georgia's offensive coordinator. Yeah, Todd Monken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did the Steelers change their defensive coordinator?
I don't think they changed their coordinator, but they lost Brian Flores, who was a big piece of their staff.
Okay, that's right. Well, granted, I think Kenny Pickett will still probably take another step forward next year. You know, I saw some good things from him at the end of the year. George Pickens is crazy. I mean, I watched him at Georgia, obviously. Dude makes some crazy catches. I mean, he had that crazy one-handed catch. But, the Steelers have a decent quarterback. I think they're quarterback of the future. Some really good wide receivers. Obviously, Najee Harris, who, didn't do so well last year due to injuries, but they've made some improvements on their offensive line. Their defense is obviously always scary with, TJ Watt. And, they did change up their linebacking group quite a bit, surprisingly, losing Devin Bush and, a couple of those other guys. was actually listening to Sirius XM NFL radio, and Jim Miller, Pat Kerr, when they were talking about the Steelers linebacking core and, getting rid of guys, as the Steelers on the Steelers team, they expect a lot of their linebackers. So when they get rid of, a couple big name guys like that, they're expecting a lot. So, and obviously they got Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the best safeties in the game. Their coverage is pretty good. They got Joey Porter Jr., who's going to be probably a really good corner. And they always have a good defense. They always find a way to win and always find a way to stay competitive. So I would like to say Baltimore, but I think the Steelers would probably be the biggest threat. I won't even talk about Cleveland. As for record wise, I've got them in around probably 13 wins, is my midpoint, as low as maybe 11, 12 wins. And I think they could get as high as 14, maybe 15 wins, depending, on who shows up on game days. But I mean, the longest distance they travel this year is out to San Francisco, and that's after a bye week. I think I did, my predictions. I think I did have them losing to San Francisco just because I'm like, it's right after the bye week or right before the bye week. But it's their longest road trip of the year. So, that might play kind of a role in it. I would expect us to probably split the series with, the other AFC North teams because it's a dogfight. It's always a tough division, one of the better divisions of football. So I think it's fair to say you could split with each of those teams, maybe sweep, Baltimore, Cleveland. Pittsburgh is just, especially at Heinz Field, it's really tough to win there. And then, I had us losing to the Chiefs in the regular season just because that'd make it easier for me to pick them beating the Chiefs in the playoffs. Because, it's Patrick Mahomes is not easy to beat, even 3 times in a row like they've done. And it's going to be really hard to do that again because the Chiefs are just that good. But, yeah, I'd say 12 wins is a midpoint. But, yeah, anywhere from 11 to 14 wins. And the player I'm probably most excited to watch next year, there's a lot of them, including Joe Burrow. But I think I'm going to have to go with Jermaine Pratt. He's been one of my favorite defensive players since he came into the league. I remember the very moment I watched him make that interception in the playoff game against the Raiders to help us secure our first playoff win in years. First playoff win I've ever seen. And, from that moment, he just was really kind of one of my favorite defensive players on the team. I've always loved he plays with a lot of energy on the field. And I was, so excited they brought him back. That was one of my favorite signings, re-signings that guys they brought back. So very, very excited to watch Jermaine Pratt and see how he can continue to improve.
Yeah, I like that you gave the Steelers credit. I'm somebody that, in the past at least, I was very vocally against Pittsburgh, but that team is not getting enough credit for what they are right now.
Probably the best draft in the AFC North.
I think they had the best draft in the league, personally. At the very least, they're top 5. Like, they killed it. And I'm a big Kenny Pickett guy. I think Kenny Pickett's good. I think right now he's at like Alex Smith level of talent. And next year he could easily be in like the Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, like prime Derek Carr type of conversation. That might be his peak. I don't think he's ever going to be like a top 10 guy, but it's Pittsburgh. They don't need a top 10 guy to win. They're going to rely heavily on that defense, and it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. So I like seeing that you're giving Pittsburgh credit. I agree in terms of record. I think about 13 wins is pretty reasonable, given how good this team is, assuming, not throwing injury into account or anything like that. This is definitely a team that's capable of 13, 14, maybe even 15 wins, like you said. And as for the player I'm most excited to watch, I mentioned him earlier. I'm a big Joseph Osai guy. I know it's going to be harder for him to get opportunities on the defensive line, but I'm hoping he kind of carves a path for himself to get more snaps and, ends up making some sort of impact, because that would also help with my Miles Murphy agenda. So I don't lose either way. But yeah, it'll definitely be a very, very fun team to watch next year, no matter what, because you got a great defense, you got a high-powered offense. That's peak football right there. That is must-see TV, other than the fact that they don't have a fullback. That's the one complaint. That's the one complaint. And Zach Taylor's never going to change that. So unfortunately, I just got to suck it up and deal with it. But yeah, that being said, I think that about covers the teams. So if there's anything you guys want to plug, go ahead. I'll make sure to put your links in the description down below.
Yeah, just follow follow me on TikTok, CincyFanInATL. And then I don't know if anybody's heard of The Stunt, but it's a fairly new social media app. Josh Carney is, I believe, the CEO. Michael Irvin had a hand in helping make it. I've been on there for a little bit. A lot of really interesting stuff happening on there, but it's like all sports, like strictly sports. You know, you can post, they call them takes, which is like, just words, and then you can post sparks, which are like videos, and a lot of really, really interesting people on there. I think Mike Silver's on there. They've had Michael Irvin on there before as well, but yeah, I'm also on there as well. Same username as it is on TikTok, but yeah, go check out The Stunt. They're constantly updating and doing a lot of really cool things. So,
yeah, I mean, you can see the name right there. To follow on everything: Instagram, Twitter, goddamn Threads, TikTok. And make sure to check out the podcasts I do, where the main point is to interview all types of players, whether it's the starters like Dax Hill, Irv Smith, Akeem Davis, that's one of the names I've had, or just the small guys, the people that want to get their name out there, the undrafted free agents that no one know about, but they have an interesting story to talk about. Make the 513 podcast, make sure to check it out.
And like I said, there will be links to all of that down in the description. So if you want to check that out, and there's also going to be links to all my stuff. My podcast, Run the North, we post every Friday. And then you can check me out on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram Threads, like Nick brought up. That's now a thing. I think this is the first episode of this I'm posting since the launch of Threads. So my Threads link will be in the description for the first and maybe last time. I probably won't ever remember to do it again. But yeah, that's going to do it for our Bengals team preview. Thank you to the two gentlemen joining me today. I really appreciate y'all taking the time out of your day to come talk ball with me. And to everyone out there watching, don't forget to subscribe. We just hit 200, which thank y'all for that. Couldn't be more grateful. And we're going to continue posting videos like this throughout the summer. Going to make sure to cover all 32 teams. Then, of course, we'll have more content coming your way during the regular season. So if I haven't talked about your team yet, we've talked about the NFC North. We're halfway through the AFC North by the time this gets uploaded. Definitely make sure to subscribe so you see that. And then also drop a like because that helps out a ton. But yeah, that's going to do it. And to everyone out there watching and the two gentlemen joining me, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.